All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Geek Dad Report Real Reviews. Today on the show, we are going to be reviewing the brand new 2016 version of Ghostbusters.
Who you gonna call?
Yeah, Ghostbusters. I'm Brian, and as always, that's Ryan, and we are going to talk about the surprisingly, absolutely, positively hysterical reboot slash remake of the 1984 Ghostbusters classic. And,
Now, I was not at the press screening like Brian was, so I will be playing the skeptic fan that I have been for the last 6 months. So.
Well, I was lucky enough to see this movie, and what Ryan's talking about, if you were not aware, is that Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters, had the the privilege of being the most hated movie trailer of all time on YouTube. So to say there was a lot of bad press going into this release would be an understatement. A lot of people have banded together to voice their displeasure at the fact that Ghostbusters A is being rebooted and 2 was being remade with an all-female cast. So I am here to say that all those people can shut the hell up. Ghostbusters not only is an amazing remake slash reboot of the original, it is one of the funnest movies I've seen so far this year in theaters, and I laughed my ever-loving ass off. So that is how I'm going to start this review. So basically, all you haters, if you're hating just to hate, just zip it, because there's no one going to be listening to you after this weekend, because everyone's going to watch it and be like, you have nothing to talk about. But I do understand, for those of you who saw the trailers and were not necessarily on board with this movie, I do not blame you. The trailers, in my opinion, were not very good. The marketing, I feel, has failed this movie drastically. Hopefully strong word of mouth is going to make this movie a big hit in theaters, because it deserves to make as much money as humanly possible. It is really, really good. So on that note, basically this movie, it is a remake of the original, like I said, 1984 Ghostbusters, but it is not a direct remake. This movie follows scientists, much like the original, and their kind of quest to prove that ghosts are real. Ultimately, along the way, they have to kind of band together to face a much larger threat than just a few individual spirits, and become the Ghostbusters that we all know and love. So that's the basic premise of this movie. If you've seen the original, you kind of know what this one's about. But this movie is not a beat by beat remake of the original. So if you've seen the original, you can go into this and it's a totally fresh movie. You don't need to worry that you know what's coming, because you don't. But that being said, I don't want to talk a lot about the original. I want to talk about this one, because this one deserves its own criticisms and reviews, because it is really its own movie. So I will talk a little bit. I will compare a little bit to the end at the very end of this review, because I know some people want to know, is the original Ghostbusters better? I will say that at the very end when I give my review.
You can't say that, because
you can, and I will. I'm gonna say it at the end.
Oh,
but
really?
Up until then, from now on, when I say Ghostbusters, I'm talking about this Ghostbusters. I'm not going to reference the originals for the most part. So this Ghostbusters, the strength of this movie lies squarely on the shoulders of its cast. This cast is absolutely, positively amazing. They are freaking hilarious.
Who, in your opinion, carried it more?
So,
or was it pretty evenly distributed?
I will say it's evenly distributed. I mean, you get Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig give you exactly what you expect Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig to give you. They are on point the entire movie, and there is no. It's hard to say they don't shine, because they do what they always do, and what they always do is great. So, but the people who shine in this movie are really the two newcomers and Chris Hemsworth, believe it or not. Now, he does not upstage the girls. This is their movie. But
okay, because he's like the Egon, not Egon.
I forget her name, but the secretary. He basically plays the secretary in this. So Chris Hemsworth is cast. Well, I'll get to Chris Hemsworth. Well, we'll go and talk about him, I guess, right now. Chris Hemsworth is cast as the kind of the comic relief to an extent, which is kind of strange in a movie that's as funny as this movie. But he's the typical dumb blonde that you think about as when movies cast dumb blonde females. He's cast in that role, but he's a male. He's brought in there basically just for eye candy. He is dumb as a board of, or dumb as a
Janine.
Janine, sorry. Dumb as a box of rocks. He's there because he looks pretty. And but you know what? It's funny, because even though he's just stupid, he's not really just a one-dimensional or two-dimensional character. He's a kind of a fully fleshed out character. You kind of like him by the end. And he's part of the team regardless, even though he's good for absolutely nothing. But I did not know Chris Hemsworth was this funny. I know I've always known he's a good actor, and he was pretty funny in the Vacation reboot movie that they did not that long ago, sequel. But this movie really does. He does a great job of flexing his comedic chops, and I really hope that he does other comedies going forward, because as much as I love him in Thor, this is probably my favorite performance of his outside of the Marvel, the Marvel movies. But
Oh wow.
yeah, I'm telling you, he really shines in this movie, and there's some great jokes because of the way he does it. And I'm going to purposely be vague because I want this review to be as spoiler free as possible, because there's so much fun stuff to see and hear in this movie. I don't want to spoil any of it for anybody. So to say this movie is unexpectedly good is definitely an understatement. I expected it to be funny. I did not expect it to be as fun and as funny as what it was. So, but Chris Hemsworth is a huge part of that. He is hilarious in this movie. But the two people who really shine, in my opinion, are the other two Ghostbusters, Leslie Jones and Kate McKinnon. I have not seen Kate McKinnon in anything. I know she's in Saturday Night Live, but this is my first, chance to check her out in a movie.
Yeah.
And she is great. She has this weird, quirky, almost insane quality to her, where she's not funny because she tells jokes. She's funny.
She's like a female Tracy Morgan.
Kind of, yeah. That's not a bad description. But her craziness and just mad scientist it's so refreshingly different that I mean, at the end of the movie, they show all the credits, and they show each person's face, and they say their name, and everybody cheered. But when she came when her picture came up, the entire crowd in the theater just started cheering as loud as they could. I mean, she doesn't steal the movie because they're all so good, but she definitely is a standout in this movie, and I'm very much looking forward to whatever she has to do going forward. I might even start watching Saturday Night Live again because of her. She is that funny. But Leslie Jones has the biggest laughs in this movie. She's the big African American lady in the movie, the big black lady in the movie in the cast, and she plays or was it Ernie Reyes? Is that who it was? She kind of plays his role in this. She's the street smart. Non-scientist in this, and she absolutely kills it. She is so good in this movie. It makes me she's hilarious in this. But the strength of this movie really is the cast. They all feed off each other, and the jokes just continue to fly. The script in this is amazing. It just sizzles from start to finish. It just pops. The whole thing just continues to hit. Katie DePaul does an amazing job of giving these actors what they need to make this movie funny. So, the other big thing I really loved about this, the other two things I loved about this movie was the 3D. I don't normally recommend 3D, but I highly recommend you watch this in 3D. They actually made this movie, you could tell, for the use of 3D. So, most movies, when you see the theater, the movie fills the screen. It's designed to fit the widescreen, the widescreen format. In this movie, they actually do it like you do when you watch it at home. There's these black boxes kind of, on top and bottom of the theater. And I remember watching at the very beginning, kind of noticing that. I said, oh, that's different. And the reason why they do that is because when they do the 3D and they shoot things at you, they go over that black box. So it actually looks like it creates the illusion that things are actually coming off the screen. And it's amazing. And it's something I haven't seen before. And it's something so simple that I honestly jumped a couple times because I kept forgetting that it was in 3D, and things would come out and I'm like, whoa. And I'm doing this in the theater, and when they shoot their proton packs, the beams are always coming right out at you. It is one of the best use of 3D I've ever seen. It's probably the best 3D since Avatar I've seen in theaters. So, I would highly recommend watching this in 3D, and I do not recommend 3D.
Would you say that's why the trailers look so crummy?
I definitely think there is some aspect to that. With the third dimension in this movie, the CGI and everything does look better. It just looks better. The action pops so much more, and everything is much. I don't know. It's much more complete in the three dimensions than it is in the trailer. So, as far as why the trailer's so bad, I don't know. I think it's because they didn't know what kind of. I think with all the negative feedback, they didn't know what kind of movie. How to promote this to people. They didn't want to play on the nostalgia, which there is a lot of nostalgia. There's a ton of cameos. All the original Ghostbusters are in this movie at some point. Pretty much almost everybody from the original movie makes a cameo in this.
Even Sam Ramis.
Well, yes, he shows up. He shows up in a way. I won't spoil how it happens, but
Oh, really? I
yeah,
was just
there is a
joking.
nod to his character. So pretty much, like I said,
Aw.
everybody is in this. It definitely, it's not afraid. It definitely embraces its heritage, from being Ghostbusters. But I feel like this
Okay,
movie
can you
almost.
just tell me if Bill Murray's character is a psychologist and
He is a
he's got
scientist. He's not a
cars?
psychologist. He's a scientist. I will say that's all I'll
Okay.
say about that. But I will say that almost it's wanting to be nostalgic was kind of a downside of this movie because really this movie shines when it does its own thing. When it tries to give fans what they want to an extent is when
Hmm.
the movie does kind of drag a little bit. But I think that's what happened with the promotion. They didn't know what kind of movie they wanted to promote. They didn't want to anger all the fans and say, and hey, this is it's something totally different. But at the same time, they didn't want to. Everybody was already angry, so they didn't want to say, hey, this is. We have lots of what you love in this because everyone thought they ruined it anyway. So I think
Hmm.
the fans are the reason why partly the promotion of this was so bad. I don't think they really knew what they wanted. And in fact, some of the problems with this movie I think is because they didn't quite know what to do because they wanted a movie that people wanted to love. You could tell that this movie was made with love. But in fact, one of the last thing I'll say that I loved about this movie is this movie's very meta. It knows that there was a lot of people that didn't like it, and they directly address this in the movie. As far as there's a point when the girls upload a YouTube of a video that they caught on camera, they upload it to YouTube, and they're talking about how they're getting all these dislikes on the video and everybody hates them, and they're talking about how you can't read the comics that the comments that the people who write comments are just idiots.
Oh,
And
jeez.
yeah, and so there's quite a few, and even at the very end, there's a very meta moment where they're basically talking to the audience that I thought was just really
Yeah.
good. So the movie doesn't take itself too seriously, but it definitely knows that a lot of people didn't like this, and I think it works partly because of that. They play that up, and I think they do a great job of it. So, but I will say there are this isn't a perfect movie. There are a few things that I didn't like. Mainly the stories. The story's not great in this. It's not bad, but it's very paper thin. The villain, I mean, not to spoil anything, the villain is a loser who somehow figured out how to access ghosts and wants to let them all loose. That is literally the entire plot of the villain.
Ah,
So,
interesting.
where the original, not to reference too much of the original, but where the original took the time to set up things that paid off at the end, this movie doesn't quite do that as well. Also, too, there's not a ton of heart in this, which is weird because the characters all work so well together, and they set up some scenarios where you're supposed to feel something, but they don't do a good job. I don't know if this movie. I heard the original cut of this movie was over 4 hours, so maybe this is a situation like Batman v Superman where they had to cut certain things that would have made this movie stronger as far as that goes, as far as that connection between the characters that will give you those heartfelt moments where
Yeah.
you really
Yeah.
feel. There's a scenario where one character rescues another, and it's supposed to be a big moment, but you don't really feel vested in it because the movie doesn't set. It's much more concerned. They definitely move this movie towards we want to make it as funny as possible, and we're
Yeah.
going to cut out some of the character moments that pay off towards the end, in service of the comedy. So so that being said, it doesn't work as well as it could, which is a little disappointing. But honestly, it doesn't matter. This movie is amazing. Before I give the review, I told you I compare it to the Ghostbusters. Is this better than the Ghostbusters? On one hand, yes, and one hand, no. The original Ghostbusters is a better story. It's much more fleshed out with the characters. The
Hmm.
story sets it, the story starts, it sets up throughout the entire movie, and then there's a big payoff at the end. This movie doesn't necessarily do that. This movie, the new Ghostbusters, was made much more for a comedy premise than a story premise. That being said, it doesn't have a bad story. It just doesn't have the in-depth, it doesn't have that magical kind of center that the original Ghostbusters had.
Yeah.
But this one is infinitely funnier. It's scarier. It has It has better CGI. It has more jump moments. It's less of a horror feel, but it definitely is scarier than the original one. So
Is it? Would you take your kids?
I would definitely take my kids. It's not scary like horror scary. It's scary like a good comparison for this movie would be like a Jurassic World to 84's Ghostbusters Jurassic Park, where that one was much more.
Okay.
Jurassic Park was much more of a serious movie that had some good moments, that was horror, and it had that magic. Where Jurassic World was much more of an action-packed, straightforward, fun. Yeah, people are getting hunted and eaten by dinosaurs, but it wasn't scary as much as it was thrilling. And that's kind
Hmm.
of what the new Ghostbusters is. It's not necessarily scary; it's really thrilling and kind of jumpy. But honestly, people, this movie is one of the most fun times I've had in a theater. The crowd was so into it. every moment was funny. It wasn't a single time that I got fatigued from all the humor. And you just fall in love with the characters, and honestly, I cannot wait to see a sequel. So I'm going to give this movie a solid 8.5 out of 10. Do not believe some of the early critics and the bad promotions. This is a must-see movie. You will laugh your ever-loving ass off, and you will want to take your children. So
that's encouraging at least. So
last little thing. There are a couple post-credit scenes. So there's one mid-credit scene, and then there's a final one after the credits. So sit through it if you want. It definitely pays off for a possible sequel going forward. Fans of the original will definitely snicker as you hear what happens at the end. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anything else? You got any questions?
My main question was mostly just because of the trailers. I mean, that's all I really have to go off of. So, I mean, yeah, I think you got it right.
All right. Well,
it's getting late for me.
Yeah.
So my
Geek
brain
report. Thumbs up.
down.
We both say go see Ghostbusters, even though he hasn't seen it. He recommends you go see it as well. So.
Yes, I always recommend you at least give something a try. Don't jump to conclusion. So
definitely. Haters be damned. This is a great movie.